Solaris is about a scientist orbiting a planet, and the planet somehow is communicating to the scientists to kill themselves or giving them memories that make them want to kill themselves. It's pretty intense stuff. 1972. An
Hmm.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers was the epitome of science fiction in 1978. It's like the monster science fiction movie.
Right. Yeah, with Donald Sutherland.
Donald Sutherland and Brooke Adams, Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
And I mean, Star Wars, Aliens, Close Encounters, Clockwork Orange, Westworld, THX, Silent Running. I mean, these are all like the top 11 films are stuff that we know very well. If you look at the top 30 science fiction films from the 60s, you have 2001. You have, what was it called? Planet of the Apes,
Hmm.
Voyage, what was it called? The Time Machine. I don't know if you would even count that. It was really badly done, right? It's just dated, doesn't work very
Right.
well. These are Mysterious Island. Um, Not a lot of good stuff in the 60s comparably. I mean, it's drastically different. It's not even like a subtle thing. And the Vietnam War, in comparison to what the World War II did to this country, you would think that the 50s and the 60s would be chock full of really dramatic stuff.
Yeah. And I think, you know, for them coming back, it was kind of a different feeling. It was kind of a, enthusiastic, let's get married and buy houses and make babies and, look to the future that way, as opposed to, let's try to find some form of escapism that, has better things than what's happening now.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not a historian, when it comes to, what happened before I was born or even during it, but, just studying what happened, the differences of, how the military was treated, how, the war was treated, how, you had all sorts of protesters, to Vietnam, and
I mean, I guess you said that you were more inspired by the 70s and 80s than you were the 60s. It just was a something I noticed that there was a distinct difference between what was considered a classic 60s science fiction film and what was considered a classic science fiction film in the 70s. I
yeah.
mean, even going on to the 80s. I mean, do you have a favorite film from your childhood?
Um, you know, I have two that came out in the same year, 1980, and that was Battle Beyond the Stars
Huh.
and Flash Gordon.
Flash
And
Gordon. Okay.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
interesting because it's not a very good movie, but it's
no,
a cult
no,
classic, right?
yeah. I mean, you go back and look at it now, and it's so cheesy. But
And that's an
like,
80s movie.
yeah, 1980, and you had the
Wow.
soundtrack from Queen, and
I know the soundtrack. I can't think of Flash Gordon without hearing it in my head every time. I can't even see the word Flash without it going off in my head. That's
yeah,
so great.
and yeah, I remember, we didn't have like HBO or anything, so we would go over to my aunt and uncle's house and watch movies there. Watch Flash Gordon or Beastmaster or Ice
Beastmaster.
Spider.
Oh my God, that was one of my favorite movies as a kid. Favorite
And
movies as a kid. When those bat things wrap their little wings around somebody, it freaked me out so badly. I think I'm 4 years younger than you. I was born in 76. You were born in 72?
right,
Yeah. I have never seen Battle Beyond the Stars. Or if I have, it was in bits and pieces, and I didn't realize what I was watching.
yeah, it was
I don't know anybody's in it. Richard Thomas, Robert
Ron
Vaughn,
Chernow.
George
Yeah,
Papard.
all these actors from the '60s.
Oh,
So
really? Okay.
you had the guy John Boy from the Waltons. You had the man from Uncle. Um, you had who would later become the leader of the A Team. George
Oh, is that
Peppard.
George Peppard?
Yeah,
His name sounded familiar. I
and
wasn't quite certain.
yeah,
And that was
and
like right before he got famous in 1980.
right, and it was basically kind of a ripoff of Seven Samurai or Magnificent Seven.
Man, that
Uh,
film has been ripped off so much. Even Star Wars would kind of be thrown in that basket of people who ripped it off as well, or just the samurais, I guess. It was riding off the success of Star Wars. It
and the
had a
funny
41%
thing,
aggregate on Rotten Tomatoes.
the
But it won
art
stuff in
person,
1981. It won a Saturn Award for Best Science Fiction Film.
yeah, yeah, the art director on that was James Cameron. He was working for
Interesting.
yeah. So if you look at like the ship on that movie, you can tell, because it's very similar to a ship from the Terminator, a flying machine, or a ship from Aliens, and you can see that James Cameron influence.
That's a name, isn't it, that keeps popping up when you think of science fiction movies in general. James Cameron. I mean,
Yeah,
he has his finger in so many classic science fiction films.
yeah. I mean, the Terminator came out in '84. I don't think I saw it that year. It was probably, it's rated R, but
My parents wanted me to stay away from rated R movies, but I ended up seeing a bunch of them anyway. I did see the Terminator when I was a kid. Yeah, it was I bet one of the best movies ever, right?
yeah,
Terminator 2, which is not an 1880s movie, which is 1991,
right. I was
is
stationed in Germany when I came out.
oh really? It's considered one of the best sequels ever made. I mean, it's a standalone film, but yet it really relies heavily on what came before. And it's really just too bad they never made another Terminator movie after the second one. And I guess they're coming out with another one soon, which is
Yeah,
going to be interesting. And Arnold Schwarzenegger's in it. Not certain.
I know. I mean, he's what, 70 something now?
Yeah, I mean it's going back to Cameron. I think he has some directorial duties on this one. Am I
Hmm.
wrong? Is there not another Terminator movie being made?
I don't know.
Terminator 7?
I'm not sure.
Terminator 7 official 2018 trailer with Dwayne Johnson. Oh, here's another Terminator 7 reboot 2019 trailer with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Hmm.
So there is not a Terminator sequel being made. Who knows? But I guess the main point is James Cameron is a crazy science fiction director who's been making just fantastic movies since the 80s. Um, going back to those two films that you mentioned, do they influence your writing? They both seem very
Um,
campy, right? I mean, they're camp science fiction, but you took them seriously as a child.
yeah, I kind of took it with a grain of salt, just writing along for the fun of it. There were some very over the top performances in Flash Gordon. The dive, my Hawkman. Kind of that kind of stuff.
Unfortunately, I mean, is it a good movie? I don't think it's good, Flash Gordon. I know I
No,
saw it as a kid because my dad he got me into science fiction hardcore, but that movie did not stick. And I know I saw it. But Star Wars, on the other hand, when I saw it for the first time, stuck big time.
I think the thing with Flash Gordon is they were all in on the joke. They knew that it was campy and that Uh, the technology for the effects wasn't that good. I don't know what the budget was for the movie, but you look at that versus something like Empire Strikes Back, which came out the same year, and the differences in the effects even, and it's just two different worlds really. It's they're not even in the ballpark as far as.
So you think that while they were making Flash Gordon, they said, let's just have a good time.
Yeah, I think so.
Uh, that's disappointing. I wonder what they could have done if they had actually. I don't know. What's a good Flash Gordon movie look like? Is that possible with the source material?
Um, I think so. I think if somebody wrote a serious script, and I think with the technology these days, you can basically do anything in a movie.
Well, you do
But
need like a kind of tongue-in-cheek, though, don't you? You want to have that flavoring to it.
yeah, I mean, I think it just depends. The whole gritty superhero whatever thing is kind of in right now. I think a movie made right now would be a lot more serious in tone. I'm actually surprised that they haven't made a remake or
Yeah,
a
it is
sequel.
surprising, isn't it? I wonder who owns the rights to Flash Gordon. Did you see
Um,
Thor Ragnarok?
I've not seen that yet. I'm like two movies behind.
Are you?
I
You
haven't,
didn't see the new one then either.
no, and I haven't seen Black Panther either.
But it really is interesting because Thor Ragnarok has humor in it throughout. It's actually quite a funny movie. It's enjoyable, um, but it's not campy. You know what I mean? It's not. I mean, I guess it is very dark. I won't spoil anything for you, but
And well, I mean, there's a difference, I think, between playing it straight and having humor and playing it, like you said, kind of tongue in cheek. We know this is silly, and we're sharing that with the audience, kind of feeling. You know, you can go even further to say that Spaceballs was kind of the ultimate with that.
yeah, but I
Um,
love Spaceballs.
yeah, but we knew it was a
Spaceballs was
comedy
intended
going
to
in.
be a kind of farce.
Yeah, and kind of lampooning the whole science fiction genre, really, in movies. I mean, you had Alien in there, you had, um,
And Alien was another one that was really, really well done. Like knocked out of the park, well done. And I've watched it again since, seeing it for the first time, and it does not age well. Obviously you have like the tone throughout. The setting is beautiful. That spaceship. The acting is really well done. That the cast is just top notch. But when you see the alien, you're like, ah, dude in a suit, or oh man, that's a practical, or something along those lines. I mean, it definitely dates itself within that tech atmosphere. But what a good movie, right? The movie
right,
is so good that it actually makes that stuff disappear. You
and
don't worry about it in the moment.
overcomes those limitations.
And that's 1979. And then 1986, Aliens comes out 7 years later and knocks it out of the park again.
Right, right.
And I don't
Another
know,
James
Aliens
Cameron.
3, did it really? It wasn't that bad, but people hated it, right?
I think what people hated the most about that was just how it ended. Um,
When she dies.
yeah, I think, and
Spoiler alert, I meant
yeah.
she dies.
Well, they kind of begin it and end it, killing off everybody you enjoyed from the second movie. You know, where it's like, I had all these characters escaping um, from at the end of the second movie, and they're all dead except her. Right off the bat.
Well, wasn't there I don't remember the guy's name. There was one character that was still alive though. He died immediately, I think. I should rewatch that movie because I really have no clue what happens in it. I know the fourth one was good. She comes back with the alien DNA inside of her. Man, that was interesting. But people hated that one also.
Yeah,
I don't
and
think people
again,
have enjoyed a decent an alien film since Aliens.
yeah. I mean, I only own the first two. I didn't buy
You
the
own the
other
first.
one.
You do not own the. I think there's four more that have been out since then.
Yeah, I,
Aliens 3, Aliens 4. If you don't count the Alien versus a Predator ones, you have the Prometheus, right? And then the one that just came out. Am I missing one?
um, I don't think so. I own Prometheus,
You own
but
Prometheus.
I
Do
haven't
you
seen
count
it
it
yet.
as an Alien franchise?
Um, I think so. I think it was intended to be by Ridley Scott. Um, it's
And he came back
totally.
on board for it, didn't he? And he came back on board for the sequel to it as well. This
Yeah,
guy's still making movies, good
it's
movies.
hard for me to watch movies nowadays with the four kids being able to
Oh, I
watch
bet. Yeah,
adult
that's
movies.
interesting. Are they into science fiction as well, or are they into horrible things like I don't know. My kids are 3. All they want to watch is Paw Patrol.
Well, my oldest is going to be 13 in June, um, and then the second oldest is going to be 11. Two boys, and they're really into the science fiction. They really enjoyed um, basically anything that comes out with robots and
Huh.
monsters and
They're like the kaiju, the big giant monster killing
Pacific
machine.
Rim, and
Have you tried to sit down and watch with them some of this older stuff like Flash Gordon? Have they seen Flash Gordon?
they have not seen that one. And mostly because I've looked at the store and I could never find it. Um,
Oh,
but
you have to go online.
yeah, yeah,
It's so funny. It had a budget of $35 million. It only made 27.1. I wonder,
wow.
since it's probably recouped it in VHS sales and
Mhm.
rentals. No. Flash Gordon, man, what a great soundtrack. And then when you think of the Flash Gordon soundtrack, you have to bring up the Highlander soundtrack too, which is another
Yeah,
just genius work by Queen.
yeah, they've seen videos the kids have of both those. Because I've shown them, oh, look at the soundtrack. You can watch one of these movies. You can't watch the other one right now.
What do you mean?
Highlander's a little probably too much for their
Oh
age.
yeah,
With
maybe
the
even with a
hammerheads
14-year-old,
and
it's brutal. I had again, like I said, my father loved science fiction. I wasn't supposed to be watching R-rated films as a child, but I watched that one as a child too. Man, it was one of my
yeah, I
favorites.
did
I
too.
watched it over and over again.
It's funny that my mom let me watch this stuff, but I'm not letting my kids watch it.
Is that because of
So,
your decisions or because you're married?
well, maybe I'll just plead the fifth on that.
I don't know. I mean,
Save
what's
my
well,
marriage.
I don't understand honestly. I mean, they're only 3 right now, but I guess it's what they will repeat. I don't know. I find it incredibly interesting to put something on. The other day, we put on Jurassic Park, which is not an 80s science fiction movie. It was made in 1991, so it doesn't count. But they watched it from beginning to end. My son loves Tyrannosaurus Rexes. So we're sitting there waiting for him to get all scared so we could shut it off. And he's like loving the monster of the movie. Like, dude, this is too easy. I cannot wait to start showing him some of these films.
Yeah, and I've showed the kids some early stuff, like Godzilla, even black and white Godzilla, and
So it's your
various
fault
things.
they like the kaiju,
Yeah,
the monster
probably.
movies.
I started them early watching the old '80s Transformers cartoons.
The one with Leonard Nimoy, the movie.
No, just the '80s cartoons that were on. Um, what were they on, like 84, and just, afternoon cartoons that they,
No, I gotcha. I remember G.I. Joe and He-Man specifically. Man, they were cartoons. They disappeared. What they have now is not cartoons. I don't know what this Paw Patrol thing is, but I would not mind it going away. God, my kids love it so much. That and Tyrannosaurus Rex. Um, I mean, what do we think as far as 70s and 80s films go? I mean, what did it give science fiction? Do you think it influenced literature at all?
that's hard to say. Um, at that time, I wasn't reading science fiction. I was watching science fiction movies, but I wasn't really reading science fiction. I was reading more Stephen King and Clive Barker and Robert R. McCammon, Dean Koontz, all these horror writers.
Dean Koontz and Stephen King, I would almost consider speculative, right? I mean, they write about odd, kind of science fiction-y, horror-y fantasy stories.
Yeah, um, but that they're ultimately looking for that shock. I think that kind of momentary terror of in situations, and for me as a kid reading that, I kind of, I don't know if I compartmentalized my reading and my kind of watching movies, but I wasn't really into reading science fiction. I don't think I was when I was young until I read Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of set the tone for me as far as reading more science fiction books.
Did
Um,
that came out in 1985? Did you read that when it first came out?
it was probably pretty early after it came out. Because I remember really identifying with Ender.
It's an
Kind of the
interesting
same.
story, though, isn't it? Because it's one of the first times that we kind of see kids being used to fight wars and whatnot.
Right, and just um, you know, kids, I guess teenagers in that kind of situation. I don't know if it had been done before that, as far as that real younger age group, and the things they're going through already, just puberty and everything, and then throwing them in these situations where they're basically fighting for their lives, and
Mhm.
um, so that kind of set me on the path of reading, I guess, more science fiction. So as far as um, movies influencing the science fiction of the time, I'm not real sure if they did. I saw more of books influencing movies um, more than the other way around.
So, what got you into writing? I mean, reading Orson Scott Card. Your two favorite movies are Flash Gordon and I can't remember the other one, Battle
Battle
for the
for the
Stars.
Yeah, and like I said, that was real early for me. 8 years old, 7 or 8 years old. So going past that, and watching movies like RoboCop and Dune and
Oh
Predator.
my God, RoboCop was so good. I had the worst. I've just decided that I have the worst parents ever. There's no reason I should have been watching that movie at 9, 8 years old. No reason at
Yeah,
all. God, it was so good though.
yeah, and I remember going to the theater and watching it. And I
Really?
was, yeah, I was
I mean, as
14.
far as 80s movies go, RoboCop was probably one of the most inappropriate science fiction movies ever made. There's drug
Yeah,
use, there's blood, there's violence, there's then
and
the
humor.
hero is just what's that?
I said, and humor. It was,
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? I mean, the movie was so
yeah,
well put together. I mean, as writers, that's definitely something to take out of 80s science fiction is the humor aspect. They definitely tried to mix in a lot of funny moments. in these science fiction movies. Of course, I'm not going to be able to think of any right now. What was one of the what caused you to think that you could write science fiction?
I have no idea.
You
I just kind of sat down one day and, I
were
had this,
just so inspired by these movies and the
yeah,
things that you read and said, "I want to do this."
just my love for the genre, I guess, of, wanting to write adventures on other planets and, what kind of technology you might they be using and, is this in the future? Is, present days, whatever. So, and it's funny, know, um, influence for this current series that I'm writing, Rajani Chronicles. You can see influence from, The Last Starfighter,
Such a great movie.
where they're recruited by aliens to go help fight. It's Last Starfighter right there.
Yep, I watched that movie over and over and over again.
And
It's such a nice
then,
little fantasy of an alien race coming down and picking up this kid from his trailer park and having him come fight the war for them.
yeah,
I mean,
so
these movies deserve sequels. That one deserved a sequel. I don't. Does that one date itself? Starfighter. The guy
um,
from Music Man is the alien best friend. It's a nice little awesomeness there. 76% Rotten Tomatoes. The Last Starfighter stands up, I guess.
yeah, and it's got that 80s technology. I mean, he's playing a big
One of
video
those
game,
arcades, those
arcade
cabinet
game.
arcades. No,
Yeah.
wait, cabinet. The giant arcade for sure.
Hmm. But the story I think is pure enough that you can still relate to it even now. This kid that all he's playing is a game, and all of a sudden he finds himself whisked away and on a starship and actually playing the game in real life.
I mean, I definitely understand what you were saying about the Vietnam War impacting the kind of tone of science fiction. That definitely shows up in the 70s. I mean, we were dealing with one of the most violent decades in our country in terms of civil strife and riots are happening, right? I mean, this is going on.
Mhm.
The 60s are filled with assassinating political figures. Robert F. Kennedy died, JFK, Martin Luther King. This decade is jaded. The 70s is just hardcore. All right, everybody's going to die. Life sucks. Our cities are falling apart. Everybody's brains are being eaten alive by, what is it called? The gasoline problem, smog. I mean, what a
Mhm.
horrible world. When the 80s hit, though, I mean, you have more, I don't know, what would you call it? With the Back to the Future movies and The Last Starfighter, they seem to be cleaner. They seem to be less gritty. They seem to be back to that 1960s method of kind of following a formula.
Yeah, and they had, I guess, uh, a happier outlook. Um, you had E.T. coming out where it's the alien comes and is it scary? The first part of that movie scares my kids every time they watch it because,
E.T.
yeah, where they're going to the forest and what's going on kind of thing, and then you find out, oh, he's friendly. He's a friendly alien, and he's got these powers, cool powers where he can make things float, and so you had that kind of a break in what came before as far as aliens, where before it was an alien that was going to grow in your stomach and burst out, and
Yeah.
where now it's, oh, he's a good guy, kind of thing.
But it's interesting because you have Starman 2, which is an 80s movie,
Hmm.
where he was a good guy, and David Bowie, the man from the stars, what was it? I think that's what the title of the movie was called. That was in the 70s, though. The Man from the Stars, the Starman. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Um, was the Bowie one? Was that the Man Who Fell to Earth? Was that?
Yes. Yeah, and what was that in the 70s? I mean, that doesn't count. The alien as the good guy, though, isn't something that we would see normally in cinema. The aliens are usually the bad guys coming down
True.
to wipe us all out or judge us, or
Right. It was kind of McCarthyism, basically, in the movies, where it's the other, the Red Scare, whatever, the Russians kind of thing, where you know we have to protect ourselves from the other, the outsiders, kind of thing.
and the 80s kind of flipped the script on that a little bit. The other's not necessarily bad, but we could be bad to ourselves, right? Isn't that what ET is
Right.
kind of saying? Is that you can trust ET, he's the other, he's fine. But dad, who works for the government, he's going to come and steal ET from you and do experiments on him. Your
Right.
family is out to get you in the 80s.
Right. And it was kind of a, questioning of authority even, and government. And
Yeah, Back to the Future does the same thing. Aliens kind of does the same thing as well, right? It's man versus nature. You have this lizard, not this lizard, but this monster that inhabits this planet. That's the planet basically attacking the people on the spaceship. But
yeah,
I mean, you can't. The thing is, what the corporation sent them there, knowing that the alien was already there,
right, right. So
right? So you can't trust the guys that you should be able to trust.
mhm. it it's all corporate kind of machinations to make money,
Right.
basically off of killing people,
I mean, going back, we
knowingly.
talked about back Black Hole, the Disney movie, The Black Hole.
Hmm.
That was more or less a bad guy. Here's a bad guy. He wants to take the ship into the black hole. He's not going to let you off. You're stuck here. But there is a definite bad guy to that movie.
Right,
Um, that kind of goes back to the McCarthy era science fiction. Here's another that you need to be concerned about.
right. And he has a really bad robot too.
He had a bad robot, and the good guys had a good robot, but the bad robot was falling apart. Right? Am I remember that correctly? God, that was such a
No,
weird movie.
there was a two little trash can robots. You know, so there was a newer version, an older version, but then there was a more humanoid shaped robot that was kind of, a real bad guy robot, I guess. It
I
worked
mean,
for.
this the funny thing is about this is that I guess we are of the same generation in terms of, you know, obviously we're going to get into reading eventually, but we are given the opportunity to watch movies first. Lots of movies first. Movies are cheap and they're plentiful and they're considered mainstream entertainment. So we get our first dose of science fiction through the cinema and through television for that matter.
Right,
I mean, the 70s and 80s, like we already talked about, was so filled with stuff for us to enjoy. And that just has not stopped. And it's just nonstop science fiction since the 70s, basically.
right.
It almost feels
And
like all that same stuff is still around, too.
as long as it makes money, might as
Right?
well
I
do
mean,
it.
sometimes it doesn't even have to make money. They'll just keep shoving it down our throats. John Carter, for instance, I mean, that's what, from that turn of the century, and they're still trying to make money off of it.
Right, right. And I never watched that movie just because the reviews were so horrible. I'll probably get around to watching it eventually, but
I've tried. I am not a fan of music in terms of, it takes you out of the scene. The first scene of that movie was so loud orchestrally that I'm like, I knew there was music. It was not taking me into the scene. It was pushing me out of the scene completely, and I could not get through it. And plus, the guy from The Wired is in that first part too, and it just bothered me to no end. Dominic Chase, no, I can't remember his name. It's not good. As far as I know, the first part of it's so bad that I can't even get into it.
Really? I mean,
But
I've read the books, and I own the books. I like the books, but sometimes,
Burroughs, right? No, what was this
yeah,
guy's name? Burroughs, right?
Edgar Rice Burroughs, yeah, and yeah, there are some franchises, book and books that they just do not translate well to the big screen. Um,
Can you think of another one?
um, I'm looking at my bookshelf right now and trying to find one.
Yeah, generally, I mean, the books are always better. I mean, that's what people say, right? The
Yeah.
books are always better than the movies. I'm just looking at James Cameron's on my monitor right now, and just looking at the movies he's done. He's not as prolific as you would think in terms of like stuff that stands out. I mean, you have the Terminators, obviously, and then you have Titanic and Avatar, which is amazing that kind of blew up the way that it did.
Hmm.
Science fiction doesn't normally, yeah, I guess it does. Recently, anyway, everything that's made lots of money is a science fiction film. In fact, I mean, I'm a little bit bored at present. It seems like everything's the same. Star
Yeah.
Wars and Marvel.
Yeah. And it's all Disney.
I mean, we're never going to be surprised again, right? There's never going to be, it feels like there's never going to be another Back to the Future where you're just watching a movie going, wow, that's really freaking good and awesome and funny and just the best science fiction thing I've ever seen. Instead, you kind of get Looper, right? Which is a good movie,
Yeah.
but
But
there's no humor. It's
yeah,
dark.
I think every once in a while somebody comes out and with an original idea or an idea that people haven't seen before, kind of like The Matrix when that came out.
Right? I mean, damn, that was
And,
good. And a
and
surprise. And I
yeah,
and honestly, before the world changed. I mean, it was in the 90s, right? The 90s were so optimistic. Everything was going to be good in the 90s, right? I mean, the 90s and the 80s, they were fun science fiction films that kind of bent what we thought of as normal. And after 9/11, it seems like everything is more formulaic. We aren't allowed to really stretch outside the bubble too much. I can't honestly think of any original science fiction movies that have come out in the new millennium that have been kind of mind blowing.
yeah, if they have, I don't. I think the lower budget ones have been
Oh
better,
man, Memento. Does that count as a science fiction movie? I don't think it does.
but there have been movies that have been independent or lower budget. I think a lot of those have been kind of better than the kind of big studio extravaganza movies where they're throwing money into it and saying, we know we'll recoup this, the first weekend.
I'm looking
And
through
they
a
happen
list
to
of
be
the best
good.
science fiction movies in the 21st century, and like the first three of them, I do not even know. World's End, Edgar Wright, Simon Pegg,
Uh,
Another Earth. I mean, these are interesting. There have been some interesting ideas. Serenity, a Firefly guy.
yeah, I enjoyed that series.
It's
The funny
2005
thing
though. I
was,
mean, I don't really think that counts.
yeah,
I
funny
mean, in
thing with
terms of
that one
its
is I didn't watch it until it was canceled.
exactly me either. So I mean, I really didn't develop like a giant emotional attachment to it. I mean, yeah, The Martian. I guess there have been some really good movies, but nothing like Back to the Future, which kind of revolutionized things, didn't it? I mean, it kind of stood out so much that it's now considered a classic. Or do I love that movie so much that it is a classic just to me?
No, I agree. It's a classic. It was, it was different when it came out. It was, you had, time travel and helped you think of possibilities of, what would happen if you went back in time and tried to change things. You have
The grandfather
butterfly,
paradox, right? I don't know who
yeah,
started that, but that's basically what they're talking about in Back to the Future is the grandfather paradox.
yeah, and you know,
I mean, back
young
then, I
things,
guess when a movie came out, you had the movie, right? You couldn't go immediately onto the internet and start communicating with millions of other people about what the movie meant to you and what the movie meant to them. So it stood by itself as this thing that you
yeah,
could
it
only
kind of
discuss with your friends and family.
right it had that kind of grassroots feel where word of mouth was
It's
you going to
mine,
school and talking to your friends about it.
right? I mean, it's something that you own specifically. Your experience with it is very personal. But now, I mean, if I go see the latest Star Wars movie, The Last Jedi or whatever, as an example, I love it while I'm watching it. Even, Princess Leia, Mary Poppins or whatever. Oh, that's weird, but I love the movie. I thought it was great. I walked out of the theater and I'm like, huh, that's really good. And I go home and I look at people's reactions to it and they're like, shitting all over it and stuff. I'm like, wait, I really enjoyed that. And everybody hates it, or 50% of the people hate it, or,
Hmm.
it ruins this good thing that you had. You no longer have that personal thing because people are pointing out the plot holes left and right.
I've kind of learned to ignore everybody else. you know
Right? I mean, that's basically what you do. You go in, you enjoy it because, I mean, Flash Gordon, you go to the movies and see Flash Gordon, you're probably going to be disappointed unless you go in with a certain mindset of, I just want to enjoy a good movie,
right.
and it becomes your favorite. Um,
Yeah, and that's the thing with sites Rotten Tomatoes. I think you kind of go there and say, oh, all these, it's a certain percentage, but remember they're all movie critics too. It's not,
yeah, that's your
you
job.
know, yeah,
It's your job
and
to critique and to pull out bad things. Their job is not to love something. Their job is to tell you what's
you know,
wrong with it.
they're coming from a certain mindset where it's not
Yeah.
just going in to watch and enjoy a movie. It's what can I find wrong with this movie that will have my review, kind of set apart from somebody else's. What can I nitpick that maybe somebody else won't? Kind of thing.
The interesting thing to me, though, with that in mind, is man, I lost my complete train of thought. So we're talking about we're talking about movie critics panning a film and making people not want to go see it or whatever. The aggregate. I'm sorry. The thing I was going to mention actually was the Three Amigos from the '80s, which I
Mhm.
loved as a kid. Has like a really low Rotten Tomatoes aggregate, which is like 10, 10, 16, 26%, something really ridiculously bad. And this is one of my favorite movies as a child. But it doesn't usually happen for me as an adult where a movie that has an incredibly low rating will be an incredibly great watch. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It just usually doesn't happen like that anymore. And I'm not sure if it's me, am I just a snarky 40-year-old who's never going to enjoy anything ever again? Or,
That was thunder.
oh, is that thunder? I was like, wow.
That's a thunderstorm coming over.
Do not go to Colorado in the summertime. I guess you guys get all the snow in the wintertime and all the thunder in the summer.
Yeah, it's the
Anyway,
Winter
yeah,
of
that's my
Citizens.
point. And another good example is that of that is the Star Wars prequels, right? I mean, we
Right.
hated it, the ones who grew up with the original trilogy, but the kids who grew up with the prequels, they love those movies.
I know. my kids, they weren't there to see them in the theater, but just watching them on DVD or whatever, they love those movies just as much, if not more, because it has the flashy CGI and everything, that they're accustomed to now.
I mean, there are so many parts of those trilogies that make me cringe. R2D2
Yep.
and C3PO on that red planet with their conveyor belts, and they're putting the droid army together. That just is so bad. Jar Jar, so bad, but kids
Yeah.
love them so much.
Well, the
Um,
funny thing was that,
wow.
yeah.
Well, it's good that we're getting off here because I'm afraid you're going to get struck by lightning or something.
Oh,
That's
I just unplugged my computer.
that's some that's some apocalyptical stuff happening over there. Biblical storm. Man. Uh, so yeah,
It's
you love the bad movie as a child, Flash Gordon. I love the bad movie as a child. I think being a child means to love bad movies that
yeah,
influence
and
you and make you into better writers later on in life.
yeah, and I mean, just I'd be sitting at home. My mom would be working, and I'd be sitting at my grandparents' house and nothing to do. So I would be watching creature features on the weekend, or and you go back and look at some of those movies now from the 50s and 60s, and it's like they were just horrible. But they've got a place in my heart because it's a sentimental thing. And when you're a kid, like, oh, I love this movie, but now you can kind of separate that and say, yeah, I loved it then when I didn't know better, or you know, now it's just you can't even sit down and watch it anymore. But,
Yeah, it's funny to me though, these movies that we love that were horrible were mainstream movies, right? They were things being dumped into the movie theaters that people went to on Friday and Saturday nights.
right,
Nowadays, there are there are film organizations out there that know that Avengers Affinity War is coming out, so they'll make like the Avengers Affinity War or something and put it out so it's exactly like the movie that you think is happening, and you'll end up watching this horrible, horrible Russian dubbed science fiction knockoff. I don't
right,
think they
and
make,
usually on Netflix.
and they're on Netflix. Exactly, they're there. You thinking, oh, hey, that's that movie I want to see. I didn't know it was actually called Avengers Immunity Stone or whatever. It's, I don't know. I definitely agree with you going into this conversation that the cinematics, the movies of the 70s and 80s definitely influenced my desire to be a writer and tell stories. Characters like Indiana Jones and Han Solo and all that made me want to put words on paper. Ooh. Is it lightning too?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, I
But
thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Do you think was there anything else that you wanted to mention about 70s and 80s science fiction and horror films?
um, no, I think I've gone through my list here of what I wanted to talk about. So
Congratulations on your next novel being published. In fact, this next Friday, I think. Actually, I might be publishing you this Friday, so you'll be having a little bit of a gap. So if it's not this Friday, it'll definitely be next Friday.
okay, yeah, so I think I planned for the novel to come out on the 11th. So
Perfect.
that'll be coinciding.
Are you doing anything special for the release?
Um, not really. I'm working long hours, and um, it's going to be. Hopefully, I'll have a day off from that time, and I can put together some type of book launch party, on Facebook or something. But um, yeah, I haven't really thought about doing anything real special for it. Just kind of
It's interesting. I mean,
plugging
there's
along.
so many people out there that will write something just so they can do the marketing that comes along with it afterward. They just can't wait to sell their writing. And there are others that, they look forward to the writing and have no clue how to sell. In that second camp myself, I have no clue what to do after I'm finished writing stuff down. It's
Well,
it's
the funny thing is, I've been a marketing professional for 17 years now,
uh
and but it's still not something that appeals to me when it comes to my own work. Um,
I had a guy who
you know,
said that you have to pretend that you are a dude that got hired to do the marketing for this guy named Brian Converse. You know what I mean? You're just
mhm.
another client to yourself, and you have to treat yourself like you would any other business relationship and do what you would do for somebody that hired you to do a job, basically. Unfortunately, I mean, you have to do this for other people then, I guess, because it is hard. I can't do it either. I have a really hard time separating myself from the guy that I'm trying to sell to the world.
And it's difficult. You got to have an emotional separation there from, please read my book. I worked so hard on it,
Yeah.
and
I mean,
knowing that
I've
that's
been
not going to
watching
work.
John Scalzi and how he kind of works his new novels, and it's very organic on Twitter. I mean, he never really says read my novels. He'll say something else with his novel in the title of it. It's very interesting.
Mhm.
But anyway, man, I really enjoyed this conversation. I'll get it up as soon as I possibly can. And I do apologize for all the technical issues that happen without
It's no
earphones.
problem.
I mean, it's really caused so much. I mean, it happens 50% of the time too. Just odd technology. I think Google's going to eat our brain someday. All right, Brian. I'll be in
Great. I
touch.
appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
Okay.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Bye.